Before we dive into today's episode, I want to remind you that the content discussed is for informational purposes only. Today, we are talking about creatine supplementation, including potential benefits, dosage, recommendations, and considerations for different individuals. However, this discussion is not intended to diagnose, treat, or replace professional medical advice. Always consult with a qualified healthcare provider before adding creatine or any supplement to your routine, especially if you're pregnant or nursing, have kidney or metabolic conditions, or take medications that may be affected by supplementation. With that in mind, let's get started. Welcome to Miles from Review, the podcast powered by CatFit Strength, where busy women like you find practical solutions to fuel your fitness journey with authenticity and resilience. I'm Kat, your host, a mom of 2 active boys, a business owner, and an ultramarathon runner, and a strength trainer in her 40s. With nearly 2 decades of experience, I'm here to help you cut through the noise of fads, hacks, and quick fixes. This is a space where we celebrate womanhood and motherhood, all while building strength and resilience and reconnecting with you from a place of self-compassion and worthiness. Whether you're lacing up your running shoes to go out for a run, driving your kids to practice, or squeezing in a moment for yourself, I'm right here in the trenches with you. Let's dive in. Shelby O'Neill is a double board certified dietitian with expertise in sports nutrition and pediatric nutrition. She holds a bachelor's degree in nutrition and dietetics from Penn State University and a master's degree in nutrition from Westchester University. Shelby began her career as a pediatric clinical dietitian, specializing in pediatric cardiology and neonatal intensive care unit. She later transitioned into sports nutrition, serving as a graduate assistant at Westchester University, where she supported the nutrition needs of over 500 student athletes. Her expertise has been recognized in the Sports and Human Performance Nutrition Dietetic Practice Group expeditions, where she has been published twice on topics such as hydration in winter sports and multivitamin supplements. Currently, Shelby is the lead sports and women's health dietitian at Time to Thrive Nutrition and an adjunct faculty member in the nutrition department at Westchester University. Shelby, I'm so excited to have you on the show today with your background in both sports nutrition and women's health, and it's such a perfect fit for this conversation. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, I'm so excited to be here. I'm looking forward to chatting today.
Yeah, it's gonna be a awesome topic, and one I know I get asked about, and as you get asked about. We're diving into all things creatine. We'll kind of start with, when we hear creatine, it's associated with like bodybuilders and really bulking up, and that's not what it's all about. So I think let's dive into kind of some of those misconceptions and what creatine really is, and we'll keep going from there. We're going to cover it all, or most of it.
Yeah. Creatine is definitely something that I know we were talking a little bit before about how something I get asked about a lot, especially from my female clients, also my male clients, but mostly my female clients. And something recently, I feel like that has kind of had an uptick of people wanting to know more about it. And I always tell all of my clients that I think knowledge is power, right? So I am happy to provide you with my knowledge on the topic, and let's talk together if this is really the right fit for you. You know, sometimes things can get kind of overemphasized as being, way more important than they actually can be for us. But let's get to that knowledge part, right? So when it comes to creatine, it was originally identified in I think the late 1800s, but it was started to be researched in terms of athletics in about the 1990s. And why they originally started to research it was that they noticed that when athletes were taking it, or active individuals were taking it, that it allowed them to get a better quote unquote pump in, right? It allowed them to exercise for longer duration without getting as much fatigue. And that then led to greater gains in muscle, right? What is interesting about creatine is that because it was started to be studied back in the 1990s, is that it's one of the longest running research supplements. So in terms of safety, it's fairly safe because we do have a lot of research on it. But originally that's where the research came from. So a lot of people associate it with kind of exercise and maybe getting bulkier, getting that pump in, like I said, because that's where the original studies were in and what it was used for. I like to first kind of educate people around why it does help you to exercise longer and at higher intensities. And that's all relating to what it does in your body, right? And when we understand kind of what it does in your body, you can understand better, is this right for me? Does it really add bulk? Is it doing something else for me? So when you think about creatine, we actually can eat creatine. So it's in meat sources, it's in shellfish sources. I mean, like I think you have to have like what is like a pound or two of beef to have like 1 gram of creatine a day. So it's not in very high amounts, but it's there. So it's always been present in our body in some amount. So our body has the processes needed to figure out what to do with it and break it down. When it comes to creatine stores in our body, though, our body stores it in our skeletal muscle and actually in your brain a little bit, like 95% in your skeletal muscle and about 5% in your brain. And what the research has showed us over the years is that our stores in the skeletal muscle and the brain are not 100% saturated. So that means that supplementation can have an impact on increasing those levels. We'll get like later on, we'll talk more about what that means and if that's needed, but can be impactful, right? And so what does it do? So how it helps activity and how it helps you to exercise longer and maybe lift higher, so kind of delayed fatigue aspect, is when you exercise, the energy systems you're using depend on the type of activity you're using. So if you're doing more aerobic, like running, then you're using an energy system that glucose is going to be used to make ATP, which is the preferred fuel source. If you're using an anaerobic energy system, so like you're lifting, right, then your body's not going to have that ability to convert glucose into ATP. So that means that it's going to burn through that ATP, which is that energy source fueling your muscles through activity. It doesn't really have a good way to get that keep coming to your muscles. So you'll fatigue earlier, essentially. So what happens and how creatine helps to prevent that fatigue is you lift a weight, right? You exercise your muscle, a short, high intensity burst, and your body uses ATP as an energy source for your muscles. When ATP is used as that energy source, we're getting a little sciencey here, but it essentially takes away a phosphate group from there. And ATP, adenine triphosphate, turns into adenine diphosphate, ADP, and then it gets recycled out. That's no longer usable as an energy source. What your body does to recycle that and make it usable again and turn it into ATP is it donates another phosphate to it from creatine phosphate. The more creatine we have, the more creatine phosphate that's available to our system, the faster we can get that ATP back from ADP, and then the more energy we have faster to your muscles. So that's like at a molecular level what's going on. So I think a misnomer is people think creatine automatically adds on bulk. No, it just helps you exercise longer and at higher intensities.
Yeah, you were bringing back some major memories to like.
I know, right?
I was like, oh my God, Krebs cycle, ATP.
Krebs cycle, I know, right? It's like I just was talking to a patient earlier about it, and they were a pharmacist. So I was like, I feel like you're going to track with me on this. Like, let's talk about ATP. They're like, oh my God, I haven't thought about ATP in a while. I'm like, I know, as science nerds. But yeah, so I just like, I love to think about things at a molecular level. Like, what is my body actually doing with it? But yeah.
Yeah. And I want to highlight a couple of things that I think a generalization. So maybe people knew this, maybe people didn't know this, but it's already in your body. You're already consuming it with animal-based products. And I liked how you said about the amount of it and like how, and we'll get into a little bit later, we're going to kind of still stick on like understanding the role. And then we're going to dive into like the role of how it pertains to being a woman. But I like how it's already there and already present. Because I do find from myself when I have these conversations with clients that they're like, wait, I am already consuming it. Well, why do I need more? Well, and to your point, you put it beautifully. So I'm not even going to try and reiterate it because it was really well said. And I'm like, oh, this makes more sense to me.
I'm a little bit of a creatine nerd. So I've read a bunch of the research on it because we'll get to it later, but it has an impact on brain health. And so personally, just for my own health history, I have used it for brain health reasons. So I just have a lot of nerdy background on it. So it's a passion project of mine.
Yeah, I will say, I mean, I take it, I was a long time, I don't want to say a naysayer of it. When I was in college athletics, so date myself, in the early 2000s.
You're young. What are you talking about?
It was like, it was around the time bodybuilding started having its growth, like I guess in the 60s and 70s, and Arnold Schwarzenegger was the godfather of bodybuilding. And I feel like the 90s were like the big boom of a lot of bodybuilding. And so there wasn't there was federations out there for like clean sport and stuff like that. So
Yep.
when I was a college athlete, it was really hard to find potentially clean proteins and creatines. And it was also around the time of the ephedrine ban and all of this type of stuff. And so our coaches were like, just don't take anything, because we were a highly competitive team. We won multiple national championship titles. So it was like, we don't want to risk what we're doing. So like I had heard of it, and then going through my adult life, I was like, do I really need this? But what the ultimate turning point for me was, I was like, no, this is really useful. And as I got into my later 30s and now early 40s, the one thing I noticed not only was, yes, that energy benefit from it with strength training, but I had more cognitive clarity from the get-go. Like it wasn't like, it was like, whoa, like I felt like my mom brain was cleared up. So
Yeah.
I felt a
There's
lot of
really cool
clarity.
research about, just a couple that came out about sleep deprivation and creatine, and how it very much has shown a positive effect in a sleep deprived state, which not a mom yet, but all the moms I know can maybe attest that you're in a sleep deprived state more often than not. So it can have benefits absolutely outside of exercise, which I'm sure we'll get into, but yeah.
Yeah, and like let's segue it there right now. I work with all women, and
Mhm.
the age range is 30 and above, primarily in the bulk age range of 30 to 45. In that time period, you're building your family, your career is at, an all-time, I don't want to say an all-time high, but you're in your career, you're moving up, you're also knocking on that door of perimenopause to menopause. So there's a lot of different hormonal shifts that are happening there. How does creatine support women through, I mean, I just threw at like whole lifespan of transitions
You're
there,
good.
but how would that impact? And for me, I'm going to say, as a personal trainer, and I only have a nutrition certification, but I always recommend like go work with a dietitian to see if creatine especially is right for you. But for someone who is pregnant, how would you, and again, and I will just say this as a prerequisite, we're not here to diagnose or treat.
Yep.
We're here to inform. So anything you hear on this podcast is just information. I strongly suggest speaking with, getting in contact with Shelby. Her information will be at the bottom, or contacting your own medical registered dietitian if creatine sounds right for you. So just blanket statement there, because not here to diagnose or treat. So
Yeah, glad you put that in there. But yeah,
yeah.
so let's kind of look at it through the lifespan. So again, creatine has gotten so much cool new research out there in the past couple of years. There's this great researcher in the creatine world. Her name is Dr. Abby Smith Ryan. She's out of, I believe it's UNC or Duke. I'm so sorry if I'm getting this wrong. I think it's UNC. She does a ton of research in her lab related to creatine, and she's on a lot of the new papers that are out there. So I like follow her on Instagram because she just is great, and she has a lot of helpful information, but a lot of great women out there doing research on creatine that helps us put it forward. So just like you said, we are not, diagnosing or treating here, but like I said, knowledge is power. So let's get the information out there and you talk to your medical provider. So when it comes to, let's start about the first stage of life, pregnancy, right? Or fertility. When it comes to pregnancy, all of the research out there on creatine with pregnancy is done in animal models. So yes, some of it shows that it could be safe, but here's how I hierarch research for my patients, right? Is in vitro. If it's in vitro, it's in a petri dish. Interesting, but I'm not going to make a recommendation based off of that. If it's in an animal, okay, we got a little bit more background and data, and this could be something promising. But when it comes to something like pregnancy, I'm still going to be hesitant, right? Human randomized control trials, great. That means that we have it in humans and we know it's safe. So when you think about the creatine research, from my knowledge on it, it's mostly still in the animal model stage. It does, I think, show that it's not harmful and it may benefit, but with caution, right? We don't have that human data. So I always just, when women ask about it in pregnancy, give them the knowledge, say, you can ask your doctor about this, but this is not something I'm going to feel comfortable doing with you while you're pregnant. After you're done breastfeeding and you want to start weightlifting again, sure, let's talk about it. But when it comes to that pregnancy stage, that's my recommendation. I mean, if you look at the animal research, it does show some positive benefits to the fetus and the mom, but there's no human randomized control trials. I'm not going to feel comfortable doing that for someone. Same kind of applies for breastfeeding. If they talk to their doctor and their doctor said that's fine and they were on it during pregnancy, then okay, you can keep on it during breastfeeding. But if it's coming to me for the recommendation, that's usually what I choose. But again, those animal models do show some promising information. So maybe if we get some human randomized control trials, then that could be more out there as something that we use for people. When it comes to, again, like childhood, adolescence, that data just isn't there as much. Although, again, some of those animal, and there is some actual human trials with kids, doesn't really show any negative side effects that I've seen, but I always get cautious with kids. I don't like giving supplements to kids. So if you're under 18, probably not going to do it. If you're over 18 and you're a college athlete, let's discuss it. But I always go food first. That's my approach as a dietitian. Food should be the foundation. And then if we have all of that squared away, then let's talk about creatine. Because if we're not eating right and eating enough protein and spacing it out and meeting all our other needs, creatine isn't going to do much, right, for our goals. So when people come to me in those life stages asking for creatine for this, what else is going on so that we cannot use that? When it comes to, active 20s, 30s, et cetera, the key part is active, right? So with creatine, when your goal is to build lean muscle, right, or retain lean muscle, the research is very clear that you want it to be paired with resistance training, and you want it to be paired with a good diet too, right? We don't want this to be like a patch over other good stuff not going on underneath. What's really cool about the new research, and in particular when you were talking about the perimenopause, postmenopause population, some really cool new research is coming out about creatine with bone mineral density and bone health in the menopausal population, perimenopause, postmenopause. I know a lot of us health providers know bone loss occurs as we age, especially with those hormonal shifts that go on with perimenopause, exacerbates it a lot. And what the research now shows with creatine and those older adults, those perimenopausal, postmenopausal, is that if you do 2 to 3 days a week of resistance training and you add on creatine, there is very positive effects with either stopping bone loss or even upping our bone density a little bit. It's hard to up it when you're postmenopausal, but at least stopping the loss can be very beneficial.
Are you curious about CatFit Strength? Well, CatFit Strength is designed to help you achieve your fitness goals with confidence and clarity. Whether you're a busy mom juggling multiple responsibilities, a woman navigating unique challenges of prenatal, postpartum, or perimenopause, or an athlete looking to enhance your performance, CatFit Strength has you covered. Let's get down to it. CatFit Strength offers personalized programs tailored to your unique needs, goals, and ensuring you get the most out of every workout. Expert guidance provided for you with the understanding of the importance of balancing strength training, cardio, and mobility. Flexible workouts designed to fit into your busy schedule, whether you're at home or at the gym or on the go. So why choose CatFit Strength? I believe in creating sustainable fitness habits that adapt to your lifestyle. I focus on helping you lift effectively, move better, and feel stronger every day. Plus, emphasis is on realistic goal setting, celebrating every win, and helping you stay motivated and inspired. Which is so huge. I'm going to pull out some things that you said just to reiterate. One, I love that you spoke about 18 and under kids, because it is something. I have a 13-year-old and he's very big into strength training and sports and all the things. And he sees mom and dad taking creatine and he's like, well, can I do that? And I'm like, no. It's food, it's strength training, it's this. And he's like, well, why are you guys taking it? And I'm like, well, first off, we have fully matured bodies. I haven't read all the research, but the research just isn't there. And so he's like, ugh. I'm like, I know. It sucks to have an educated mom.
I know, right? And the research in the adolescents with it is mostly in those with like muscular dystrophy, or because it's being kind of used in research like Parkinson's, or kind of trying it out with a lot of different things. So that's where it mostly is with the research with kids, and with any kid, unless it's like a multivitamin or they have a low vitamin D, for example, and they need to bring that up. I don't like supplements because they're still growing. So in that way, like, with your son, which I'm sure you did, we'd focus on food. So like meat has creatine, right?
Yeah.
Let's see how we can do that. But the kids, it's very out there these days, and they very much want it.
Yeah, exactly. I told him, I was like, well, meat has protein. It's protein and creatine.
Right, no, protein too.
Yeah. So, and he's like, really? And I said, yeah. So you're getting it in the diet. And I said, and I did tell him, I was like, you're growing. There's so many factors that are changing. I said, when your body hits quote unquote that steady state, when you're mature, it's sort of easier to know what you're doing. And so he obliged by it, and he was like, okay, that makes sense, mom. I was like, I'm not trying to be like only ours, but
Well, and what I tell a lot of kids too is a lot of the information they see out there, hear from their buddies, or they see on social media, it's all meant for a different decade of life, I
Yeah.
say, right? This is
Yeah.
meant for us in our 30s, 20s, whatever, and not younger. Unfortunately, a lot of the information out there is not meant for younger kids, yet that's what they're seeing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Again, in the future, maybe there's research
Yeah.
that shows it's great, and that's then. But as a practitioner, we're research based, right? And so you want to do what the research says.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I also loved, I read that, study about the bone mineral density and
Yeah.
loss. And I was like, this is incredible. It is one that for me and the way I train my clients is yes, we are going to have all the aesthetic goals you want.
Mhm.
Brilliant. I'm
Mhm.
all for that. But let's, for as much as you can, I understand exercise is not always, I don't always love exercising, but we're not always in love with the process. But if we embrace the process and understanding the strength training is going to back it up when we are, and depending on when you conclude your family, it's like we want to make sure we're fortifying our body. We want to make sure that what pregnancy and that postpartum time period took from your body, that we're getting it replenished,
Yep.
gaining that strength back, making sure that nutrition is there, that sleep, that stress mitigation, because the more those big foundational blocks are there,
Mhm.
so far, the research, again, there's still more
Mhm.
research needed,
Mhm.
is there that you fare a bit better through
Yeah.
perimenopause and menopause. Again, there's an exception to everything, but most research shows that you have less muscle loss, less bone density loss if you are strength training. You have that good nutrient dense whole food diet, and you're sleeping better, and that stress mitigation is there. So I always tell clients, I'm like, and I love that you mentioned that it's like those foundational blocks have to be there
Mhm.
before we add on.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah. That's a supplement's only something I add after everything else, our diet, we're meeting our calcium needs, our vitamin D, our magnesium, other things that are really important for bone health too, right?
Mhm.
And what I find too a lot of times is maybe because of kind of like the era they grew up in, kind of the diets that were popular then, but a lot of women that are nearing menopause or in menopause or post-menopause really don't eat a lot of calcium-rich foods because a lot of them are high in dairy. And so it's a very big bone health is a very big component that's missing. And it can be motivating sometimes to kind of let them know about the science. Like, listen, we don't want this to get further down the road. We have this bone loss occurring. Let's talk about our nutrients that are important for bone health. And if you're not eating enough overall, right?
Yeah.
Your body is going to start to leach calcium and phosphorus from your bones, right? If you're not eating, if you're in too big of a calorie deficit. And so we need to make sure all that's secure and all that's good. And if that's all great, then let's add on some creatine.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's huge. And I love that you brought up, if you're too much in a calorie deficit, like that's so detrimental. That's
Yeah.
a whole other
A whole nother
podcast.
topic. We could do a whole nother thing on that
Yeah.
passion project of mine. But
Oh,
I can see it, and I'm sure you see it all the time. And it just makes me, I just wish we could get the word out there more. Like this could be doing more harm than good for you, right? And I would tell people, especially with bone health, you're not going to feel it right now. You're not going to feel it when you're 30. When you're going to feel it is when you're 50 and you're 60. Yeah. Yeah.
yes, it is one. I'm like, please just eat. And as I tell my clients, like I said, I do nutrition coaching where I'm like, let me just see what you eat.
Yeah.
And oftentimes I'm like, you're not eating enough. And they're like, oh, I can't eat anymore. And I'm like, because you've trained your body
Yep.
to undereat.
Yeah.
And when I help them articulate the signs of hunger cues or the undereating cues of the fuzzy brain, the energy drops, the moodiness. The one that they're always surprised at is the interrupted sleep where they're waking up multiple times in the night. And I said, yes, if you're waking up, especially in that 12 to 4 a.m. time period, that's like peak. I'm going to just roll it into the word of healing time where the body really recovers. And that is where you don't want to be waking up. I mean, we want to get to bed before midnight, definitely. But like, if these are all signs that you may be under eating, and when we look at like their whole, I like to see at least 7 to 14 days, I'm like, put everything in there. I'm not judging. I'm here to help and see they're just not eating enough because we hear cut calories, restrict, subtract. And I'm like, no, let's add. We're going to be adding.
Yep.
I want to add more, add a vegetable, If you don't know what to do, just add a vegetable, add a fruit, add a protein, animal-based or plant-based.
Yeah. And again, to that knowledge too, a lot of them just don't know how big of being in that big of an energy deficit, what that does to your body systems, right? It's and getting that knowledge out there, getting that education out there, even though maybe it's kind of what going against what they've been taught for a while. I love that you use those hunger cues with them. Like my one thing I always do at the first visit, or most of the time, I should say, I don't want my clients calling me out, like, you didn't do that with me at the first visit, Shelby. It was the third. I have a hunger and fullness cue scale.
Yes.
And they're like, well, I'm not hungry. I'm like, okay, but are we feeling faint? Do we get a little irritable? Do we have a headache? That's hunger, right? Your body is just not recognizing it as that. And, if I always have them make a fist and I'm like, this is the size of your stomach at rest.
Yeah.
Your stomach's a muscle, so you have to train it, right? And so if you're only eating a little amount and your muscle that you're training is only used to opening a little amount, yeah, you're going to get full fast. But you can train it, just like any muscle, to accept more food. And so that initial fullness feeling with trying to eat a little bit more food will go away. It just takes a little bit of time and consistency.
Exactly. That's what I tell them. I also tell them too, they're like, well, in the mornings I just can never eat, so I don't wind up eating until 1. And I'm like, okay, here's what we're going to do. You can break the meal into 2 meals. I'm like, I love a first breakfast and a second breakfast. I'm all about that. I get mornings can be rushed, but let's really provide that nutrient start off. So we also don't have on the flip side, you're now in, I color code my hunger cue to like the red zone. Think about your toddler. And if it's been a moment, think back to those tantrums. That's what your body's doing. All the alarm bells are going off. And so then you wind up grabbing something that maybe you weren't really excited about or really wanted to eat. And so now we're dealing with a lot of guilt and shame, which we want to be excited about what we want to eat. And I always come from the standpoint, we all know fruits and vegetables and lean proteins and healthy fats are what we need to eat. But what happens is no fault of our own, most often is we're in a highly pressurized society where you're on the go. And so, and being a mom, you're an afterthought.
Yeah.
It just happens that way. So how do we put in things to set ourselves up for success? It's hard. I always tell them, I'm like, it's simple, but that doesn't mean easy. It can be hard to start thinking about yourself in that way or getting little bits of nourishment. And when we've been taught don't snack, it ruins meals. Well, actually, I love snacking.
I love a snack. And, I wish, and I'm glad that we have this platform to do this. I want to get the message out so much. So many women come to me and they try to eat as little as possible throughout the day.
Yes.
And that is their goal. And then inevitably they fail because their body needs food. And then it sends them these very strong hunger cues at night and they feel out of control around food and then they beat themselves up for that. And really, you're just setting yourself up for failure throughout the day. Let's shift more of our energy intake during the day. That's when you're busy. That's when you're doing things. And sometimes this is when creatine can come more popular because it's like, oh, well, it's easier just to take a supplement than it can be to kind of work on some of these structural things because your life is so busy. You're asked to do so much. And so just like you said, a lot with the moms, it's let's put ourselves first a little bit. What can we do once this week to put ourselves first so that you're getting the nourishment you need so that creatine can be the icing on the cake and not like a Band-Aid over a bullet hole is the analogy I like to use.
I like that.
Yeah. So I firmly am very on board with everything that you are on board with as well, with kind of teaching women how to refuel their body when they were taught in the improper way through societal norms or et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. Oh yeah. 100%. So with creatine, let's dive into the dosage amount, when to take it. Is there best practices or kind of if someone's, you know what, this sounds like it's right for me. And it's that one more thing I have to do. How can I fit it into my crazy lifestyle? If I also find that women don't want to do it wrong. And I get with working out, well, is there a best time to work out during the day? No, whatever is easiest for you, just work out. There's no science behind when to work out to get the best benefit of it. Just work out.
No, absolutely. So when it comes to creatine, it depends. There's 2 different ways you could do it. So there's something, once again, we've decided that your diet is good and everything else, and we're adding this on top. So there is a loading phase you can do. And then there's just kind of taking 1 serving at a time and slowly working up those stores. So again, it's going back to those stores in your body. What we want to do is generally our creatine stores, what the research says is they're like maybe 60 to 70% full just from diet stuff. So if you're a vegan or vegetarian, it's going to be lower. They respond better because again, it's found in those meat-based sources. And so the loading phase gets up to that 100%. So it goes from 70% stores full in your body from normal diet to closer to 100. Again, we don't know the exact amount. Not everyone's a creatine responder either. That's a fun fact, niche. Not everyone responds to it. So It's hard to tell if you're a responder, but we know that not everyone responds to it. So the loading phase is usually, people do it a little bit differently, but usually it's 20 grams a day for like 4 to 5 days. That being broken up into 5-gram doses 4 different times throughout the day. So like 5 grams of breakfast, in the morning, early sometime, around lunchtime, afternoon, and then dinner. You do that for 4 or 5 days, and then you go to a maintenance dose of 3 to 5 grams a day. That is the way to get your stores up faster. Now, with that can come some of those side effects that you hear about on the internet: bloating, water weight, etc. A lot of that, I would say, is a little bit more anecdotal than seen in the research. But when we do see it anecdotally from people, meaning like people telling us about it versus it being in the research, it's more with the loading phase. So I always tell people, if they're worried about water weight gain, a couple pounds, bloating, don't do a loading phase. So if you don't do a loading phase, it's just literally starting 3 to 5 grams a day and continuing on with that. That's how I have most people do it, because I don't work, unless you're using it for like traumatic brain injury prevention, which we can talk about how it can help with brain health, or you have an athlete that's really highly competitive that has an event coming up. There's really no need to get your stores up in a week versus 3 weeks. So I just try to do normally just the 3 to 5 gram dose with individuals so that we don't really have any GI side effects, and we eventually get up to full stores in the body.
Yeah. Like when I first started taking it, I did the kind of like the build up, like,
Yeah.
and I did notice, and it wasn't that bad. I felt like literally my cycle was about to start, it wasn't bringing on my cycle. I want to do, be very clear about that. I just was like,
bloating.
This is a familiar bloat. Okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was one thing. And then, I just do it for me, and we can go into, is there a best time or not? For me, I just do it dropped in my I drink my coffee black every morning. I'm typically a morning workout. So for me, morning is when I take it, and that works for me. I'm not going to fuss over the little percentages, or if there's a best percentage, you're like, no, actually you're not getting the best results. Oh, gladly.
No, so I am the same way. So when it comes to creatine, also, we want to make sure that it's creatine monohydrate, right? So we want to make sure we help. I think would probably get to that later anyways, but so we want to make sure it's the creatine monohydrate. That's the most well-researched and well-tolerated creatine. There is other ones out there. It's also not that expensive compared to other supplements. So with the creatine, I also just do it in my morning coffee. So what the research shows is that, yes, if you want like the 1% different benefit, you can take it within like an hour pre to post workout with 15 grams of a simple carbohydrate. That's going to best optimize absorption. What the research overall shows is you just need to get it consistently every day. If that's breakfast that you remember to do it, that's great. That's why I tell people, just what's one time a day that you're going to remember to do it, because consistency is key. So really what I tell clients, it does not matter. If you're, again, an elite athlete that's training and time matters, okay, let's consider that cutoff. Otherwise, just any time of day that works best for you and you remember. I just say not at night, because, sometimes it can have a little bit of burst of energy, not burst of energy, but it helps give you that mental clarity and acuity. So if you want to sleep well, maybe not at night, but yeah, otherwise it's the same thing. Just a time of day that you can take it consistently. I do tell people it does not mix well in water. So I always do it. Oh yeah. So I always do it in a hot beverage or a food. Because if you put it in water, it just tastes a little like, it isn't my experience, a little like crystally almost, like you're kind of drinking, like it's kind of chewing a little bit. So I always put it in a hot liquid, it dissolves, or a food. So
that's good to know. Yeah, because it's just easy. I have my coffee every morning.
Yeah, you remember it, you do it
right in there. Yeah, it's perfect. That's good to know that it's just consistency and getting it in every day. Now, I did see one of my clients brought it up to me, and I don't know if you've seen this. Creatine is being paired with multiple things.
Yes.
And so, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Going back to, like I say, that best practices, and just, sometimes it's like, what I feel is too many things paired together. It's just not getting what you need. It's just marketing and making money. And that frustrates me on so many levels. So
I am always a single ingredient supplement person, besides like a multivitamin when I can, right? And not everyone needs a multivitamin, I don't think either, right? As if your diet is sound and you got everything in there. But yeah, I don't pair creatine with anything. The thing you'll see it in frequently, that if they love it and they don't want to stop it, that's fine. It's like a pre-workout. But no, I haven't seen the science on it actually being absorbed better when paired with other things. Maybe I'm missing something and it is, but no, I only like to use it by itself. And from the research that I've seen, it is very well absorbed by itself. I agree. The more things you add into something, one, the less likely that we know what is causing the positive or negative effect. And two, is that inhibiting absorption of the creatine? We don't know. So I always try to avoid those supplement stacks, like I say, meaning like multiple supplements in one product if I can with clients. Yeah.
Yeah. I believe that too.
And two, with supplements, supplements are regulated so differently than food too. So I just always am cautious with them.
And then are there specific types of creatine monohydrate that are better? Like you said, I mean, supplements are so regulated differently, and it is largely an unregulated field. And that's where I was explaining I stick with, what is it? National Sports Federation, NSF.
NSF sports certified. Yeah.
So I stick with those. I mean, I don't think I'm a runner. I compete. I am not elite. I'm just out there for a good time. So
yeah, no, I always recommend third-party tested supplements, even if you're not being drug tested, because I just feel safer with them. So, and third-party testing is going to be NSF Sport, USP verification, or like Informed Sport or Choice are usually the ones that I look for. GMP is a third-party testification, good manufacturing practices, but I find that their standards for GMP are lower than when it comes to something like a USP or NSF Sport or an Informed Choice. But yeah, so Thorne, I personally use their creatine monohydrate. They're third-party tested. Momentous is third-party tested. There's a couple out there now that are third-party tested, the creatine monohydrates, but I typically will go with either Thorne or Momentous if I'm taking it or recommending it to someone. But it doesn't mean there aren't other brands out there third-party tested, but those are the ones that I know of that I use.
I use Thorne. I love Thorne. Yeah. I find it has a pretty good price point too.
It does. It really does. And I think that they make a good quality product and it's third party tested, so I feel safe.
Yeah, I love all their supplements, and I'm not affiliated. I'm not just saying. And the best part is they come right to my door, so it makes it easy.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
I'm trying to think, what else haven't we covered here? I think it would be interesting to kind of go a little bit into that brain health, because one of the things that's coming out, and especially in that perimenopause, menopause area, is brain health. And I obviously spoke to, when I took it, I noticed more cognitive clarity. I felt literally like I was plugged back in for the first time since having kids. So I was like, this is amazing. I personally had not realized that benefit to creatine when I started it. So
yeah. And it all comes back to what it does to that ATP molecule, that very scientific thing we were chatting about in the beginning, right? So ATP is the fuel source for your body's cells, right? And so we know that, again, it comes back to where the creatine stored. So stored in your muscles, your skeletal muscle, and then in your brain. So the research doesn't show it's as good with the doses are what's interesting and not adequately confirmed, I guess. There's some research that shows that maybe higher doses are needed for it to have a better effect on the brain than just the 5 grams a day. That's still kind of being debated. But what we know in the research is that, one, we saw that research on the increased mental acuity in sleep-deprived states. And two, it's used a lot with people with TBIs or concussions. And so some of the research shows that when you have it on board before or you take it after, you have a better likelihood of decreased symptoms and recovery. And so it all comes back to that energetics of how it powers the ATP in your brain. So again, same with your muscles, if we're thinking about it theoretically, right? Then when that brain cell uses that ATP and it recycles it out and it's ADP, that phosphocreatine can donate a phosphate and rephosphorylate, that's ATP again. So more energy faster to those brain cells is one of the theories as to why it can be so effective for brain health. But research is still coming out about that, but it's very promising. And there was a good review by the International Society of Sports Nutrition from 2017, I think it is, on creatine. I like the reviews because they're very wide ranging, but they also give like lovely little bullet points at the end. That's like, here's the main, from this 20 pages, here is the main point. So I love that. And they show that they're doing a lot of research now. Can't say it's been successful, I don't think, yet, but with Parkinson's and Alzheimer's and different muscular dystrophy, like I said, cool stuff that maybe in the future research is going to show that it can actually have an impact for.
Now, I'm going to throw a question at you. I can't remember the study, but there was a study. And one study, singular, does not mean it's like end all be all. but it talked about how, in particular for women, and it talked a little bit more towards men too, that after the age of 60, creatine isn't beneficial. Now,
Mm,
I'm just curious on your thoughts on that because it was,
yeah.
like I said, it was one study. So
Yeah.
I kind of take that and I didn't
Yeah.
push it further because most of my
Yeah.
clients are in that like 35, 45 range. And so,
Yeah, that's so interesting. I've actually never seen that. So yeah, I would actually, but I love to learn new things. So I would love to read that study and kind of figure it out and dice it apart. Like, was it in vitro? Was it animal? Or what kind of a study population was? Did they already have like osteoporosis or something? I had never heard that. That's interesting. I'm trying to think in my brain like what the mechanism might be for that, but I don't know. So to answer the question, I have not heard it. So I'm not sure. But in my experience, it has helped preserve some bone mass for individuals that I know I work with that get DEXAs so that I can like actually see their bone density. So again, not necessarily increase it, but prevent it from dropping when paired with proper diet and resistance training.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll have to track down that study. So I just kind of like took it with a grain of salt and I was like,
Yeah.
well, I'm not there yet. And
But
I
it's
don't
always
work with
good to
clients
keep
there.
your finger on the pulse, right? And
Yeah,
that's the good thing, I guess, good and bad about research is it's always changing. So, just because we know one thing to be true now, we might actually find out that it's not, right?
right.
Creatine does have some more longitudinal, so like 40, 30-year studies on it. But that's why I like science and I like keeping my pulse on it, is it can change and then we adapt. But it's good to keep your pulse on it and find interesting stuff like that because hey, maybe it doesn't work after 60, but not
Yeah.
that I have seen at least yet.
Let's see here. I mean, we covered a lot. We covered like
I
I'm
can
like
talk. I don't know if you noticed, but I don't have a problem talking.
which is great. I've seen a lot of buzz around, and that's why I was like, the expert in it. I need someone who knows all about it, and we can really decode it because there are a lot of apprehensions in taking it because of the myths of getting too bulky. It's only for bodybuilders, or I'm not an athlete. And I always tell my clients, I'm like, you are an athlete.
Mhm.
Yes, you may not be competing for a team or an athletic competition, but you are an athlete for life. You are trying to get your body in as best peak condition so that you are thriving and not just surviving to get to that quote unquote finish line. It's like we want to feel good. So if there are things that can enhance after we're doing those foundational blocks, then this will help. What would you say to someone who's like, oh, I just don't know, like kind of on the fence with it?
Yeah. I always kind of go back to like first educate them on like here's how it works in your body and then what are our goals, right?
Mhm.
Maybe your goal isn't to put on lean mass or isn't to preserve bone density or for your brain health. Maybe their goal is something else. But if your goal is one of those things, then let's do some education about how it can help those things and talk about safety around supplements and what we can do in our diet first. See if that helps. If it doesn't, then we add this on. So it's always like I say with it, I'm sure with you too, it's like a partnership with my clients.
Mhm.
I have the education in the background. I'm going to let you know, but you're the expert on you, is
Yeah.
what I always like to say. And so I usually just start with what their goals are, the education around it. And so if an individual came to me now and asked it, that's what I would do, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, knowledge is power, like I said.
100%. Yeah. Big proponent of clients are always in the driver's seat, and I'm here to help
Mhm.
guide them
I
to
mean,
their
we live
outcomes.
the dream, right? We
Yeah.
get to do our jobs are what we are very interested in and our nerdy little hobbies that we get to turn into a career. So I well, just enjoy what I do and I think you do too and I think that translates for people. And so the more that I just genuinely like to help people. And so the more knowledge I know about something, the more I can help other people. And I think that in the end that just helps more people, right? So, and I love that you have a platform that kind of helps to get messages out there too that matter.
Thanks. Thanks. Yeah, it's a passion project, but it's also something that came out of frustration of just so many nuanced things being screamed into this wide void. The research is getting better. This still has a long way to go, in which a lot of the research is still on small populations of subsets of women. I tell clients today, you are in one of the best times to be alive and being a woman
Mhm.
and going through prenatal, postpartum, perimenopause, menopause, because the amount of research that is coming out, long-term study, 10 to 20 years, is
Yeah,
coming out now.
which is huge.
It's
That longitudinal
huge.
data is huge.
And
Yeah.
and the coolest part for me is it's all positive.
Mhm.
That hope isn't lost.
Yeah.
When I was going through, I was pregnant with my son the first time, with my first son, it was, you ruined your body.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's so not the case. And then this fear around perimenopause and menopause, it means I
Yeah.
can still be in an action ready body to
Yeah.
continue running, to strength train, to
Yeah.
still see what I want and still thrive and climb the mountains and whatnot.
Yeah.
It's huge. So
And I think, I'm not in that life stage of perimenopause yet, but I think, and take this with a grain of salt as a younger individual, but that it was almost viewed as inevitable.
Mhm.
This is just going to happen. This
Yeah.
decline is just going to happen. And now we know that there's actually things we can do to mitigate that and to improve that quality of life. And just like you said, it's so positive. It's not just inevitable anymore. We can help ourselves, and there's new science that shows that doesn't have to be this way.
Yes, exactly. And that's what I tell my clients. I kind of love in the Asian country, the mindsets are, it's a new spring, it's a new beginning. And I'm like, and that's what they call it. They don't have menopause as the term. And I
Oh,
don't know the word. If I knew it, I would butcher it.
yeah. No,
And it's a new
yeah.
coming of age. How amazing is that? And so that's why I tell clients, I'm like, don't look at it as a dreaded thing. Yes, you could do all the strength training, the stress mitigation, the mobility, and the cardio. There are still going to be symptoms. There's going to be hormonal changes. We can't control that. But with the studies that I've been reading, that it does help mitigate on the other side. That if you are creating those foundational habits and strengthening them now, no pun intended, to keep strengthening, you're going to have a better outcome on the other side.
And
So
the hardest part is when there's no immediate reward for it, convincing people and showing them that this matters, I promise. And hopefully with the right messages out and research showing that it does, that can help to further and further kind of get that out there for people.
This was awesome. If anyone has questions, you can message the podcast. Shelby's information will be in the show notes. Time to Thrive has virtual sessions as well. So you don't have to be local. We're in Southeastern Pennsylvania. She's in Phoenixville. But if you're a local, you can do in person, or they have the ability to do virtual, which is amazing. So you can reach more people. Thank you so much for coming on. I know I learned more about creatine and definitely got to jog back to the days of all the anatomy.
I expect a full memorization of the glycolysis cycle by the time we meet next. No, it's been absolutely lovely. So thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for coming on. Thank you for tuning in to Miles from Review, powered by CatFit Strength. If this podcast inspires you, don't keep it for yourself. Hit follow or subscribe to stay updated on the new episodes, and leave us a review to help more women and moms discover this space. Your feedback fuels this podcast, and I'd love to hear what's working for you or what topics you want to dive into next. You can connect with me on Instagram at CatFit Strength, or share this episode with a friend who is ready to embrace her strength. Remember, fitness isn't about perfection. It's about showing up for yourself and finding strength in every step of your journey. Until next time, keep moving forward, 1 mile at a time.